Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another Marvel Rivals character pitch, and today we are going to be inspired by the new MCU film Thunderbolts, or if you've seen all the posters, New Avengers. Now, there won't be any spoilers for the actual plot of the movie in this video, or at least I'm going to try to avoid them, so if you haven't seen it, don't worry, but we will be covering the characters and some of their comic book abilities and history, and generally who they are, so fair warnings if there is any crossover between their comic book iterations and the movie's plot. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Hamato House. We are going to be fully creating the movesets for two new characters that could hypothetically come to Marvel Rivals. We try not to get bogged down in numbers or stats in these videos, and overall, this is just for fun. So with that, let's get to the team itself. Firstly, of course, there's everyone's favourite poster boy, Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, who is already in Marvel Rivals, and already has a skin based on the new film. So I won't really be talking about him too much. The other fan favourite we are missing today is Yelena, aka Black Widow 2.0. That's because not only do we already have the original Black Widow in the game, but also because Yelena would be too similar to Natasha, when I think some of our other choices can be a little bit more original. That's not to say Yelena could never get added to the game, but I'd see her more of a skin than as an actual original character. Then there's my favourite option from the team. As much as that MCU variant isn't exactly what anyone can actually call good, Taskmaster is an iconic AF comic book villain, and I already made a pitch for them. Yeah, if you check out our Earth's Mightiest video, I create a full and fairly complex character kit for Taskmaster alongside the Wasp. Speaking of the Wasp, straight from her film and into the new Thunderbolts movie comes Ghost, who alongside US Agent make up the final members of the team that we are not going to be making. Both of these guys could definitely make for unique character kits, but unfortunately they just didn't quite make the cut for this video. Our first hero is an icon for an entire nation, the soldier from the cold north, the defender of communism, the USSR's greatest weapon, Red Guardian. Alexei Shostakov was a pilot turned super soldier in Russia's attempt to create their own Captain America, and in a lot of ways he's very similar to Steve Rogers. He has the same abilities, he represents a country, and he owns a mighty shield of his own. But historically, the many captains of Marvel Comics have all kind of turned that into their own personal types of characters, with unique expertise and sometimes their own set of superpowers. Red Guardian, unlike his more heroic alternates, became that of an assassin. He's also a master pilot and eventually, after a long history in comics, joined Black Widow in the world of superheroes. I want Alexei to lean into his shield and have hyper defense, but I also want to represent his time in comics where he wasn't just a Cap clone, and give him some bare knuckles brawling and maybe a reference to his time as a pilot or his classic mohawk in his design. The last thing I have to say before we delve deep into his kit is that I will be taking liberty in using Marvel Rivals Freedom to create new tech as an explainer for in-game mechanics, kind of like Hulk's belt, Cap's shield, and Jeff's powers. Well, without further ado, I present Red Guardian as a vanguard. First of all, Alexei has not one but two primary attacks, albeit they are basically the same thing. Hammer and Sickle both has him making a melee attack towards his opponents, one using his iconic red shield and the other with his bare fists. The way you switch between those, however, is going to come up later, but as long as you're holding your shield, you have access to his secondary Guardian's gift. This has Alexei raise his shield and summon a large energy force field in front of him. His shield has its own health bar and it takes damage, and as it takes damage, the size of this energy force field shrinks until the shield reaches around a third of its max HP, where the force field is completely gone and only the physical shield remains. Unlike Captain America, however, I picture this shield being quite large, like in this fan art that I found online. Super cool. by the way. Like, it spreads wider than the Guardian himself naturally. Of course, if you hit 0 HP on the shield, this ability is locked, and if you're not currently holding your shield, well then Guardian's Gift will recall it to his arm. I kind of like the idea that if you recall it, then it can damage enemies it hits on the way back to you, but collision issues with the walls and trying to root it could cause problems there, so I'd take it or leave it really. Now, you may be wondering, why would you ever want to drop the shield? How does it regain energy? What is the playstyle here that truly makes him unique? Well, it all centers around two passive abilities, Guarding Grit and Red Power. Guarding Grit means that when Red Guardian's shield loses health, he generates minor overheal. This basically means that when the shield falls, your health bar is high enough for you to actually switch to the offense and directly play into your next passive, Red Power, which transforms the damage Alexi deals when his shield is unequipped into health for said shield. Basically, that means if Red Guardian takes advantage of his overheal and lays the beat down on the enemy team, his defensives are reset for if the fight turns sour and he needs to put the shield back up, or for the start of his next engagement, rewarding you for switching between shield and fists regularly. Of course, all of this can be pretty pointless if he doesn't have some cooldowns to play around with, and the first ties into when he's fighting without his shield. Activating ability 1 when barehanded triggers Arctic Wrap, a boosted state that lasts for a few seconds and increases Red Guardian's damage output. Of course, since Red Power is based on damage, this innately speeds up his shield's recovery as well, fully incentivizing him to use his health to its very limit. Of course, if he has his shield equipped, ability 1 instead acts a little bit differently. In that case, it becomes Iron Curtain. This is a key move that grants Alexi a second playstyle, something I'll cover in just a moment. You see, Iron Curtain has you slam the shield into the ground and place a stationary energy wall. This acts identically to Guardian's Gift and thus cannot be used when the shield is below a third HP. Doing so would just discard the shield. Basically, this is his stance change button, but it also doubles as a defensive cover ability. And finally, he needs a way to maintain his positioning on the front lines. And as someone who switches from hyper defensive to hyper aggressive, I think a dash attack makes the most sense. Russian Rocket at its core is a simple dash forwards, but beyond that it has two unique features depending on whether you are punching or shielding. If used with the shield equipped, the dash makes Alexi indestructible for its duration, absorbing incoming attacks, and of course, if it isn't equipped, then the dash instead will act a little like Wolverine's and pin nearby enemies that he hits, basically dragging them with him. Overall, this means that Alexi has two obvious playstyle options. Either he can act as a walking guard using his shield to its max before dropping it with Iron Curtain and going on the hyper aggressive, forming a cycle of Guarding Grit and Red Power, taking it in turns and ensuring he is constantly fired up and shielded. Alternatively, he can play as a wall vanguard, dropping Iron Curtain and using his fists to maintain the wall's health. This means that Guarding Grit almost becomes an alert for when enemies fire at your wall and acts as an instant health when someone targets your blocked off route. Of course, this kit also allows for other tactics and creativity to be expressed, and if I do say so myself, I think this might be one of my best designs yet. Now for the ult. After playing like a bipolar role switching madman, you will gain enough energy to leave behind a Russian legacy. This overcharges his shield, swapping the health bar for a timer. The ult's effect will then last for as long as the timer does. All allies gain access to Guarding Grit, meaning that you can farm massive overheal for everyone as long as your opponents are willing to shoot the infinite health bar shield or Iron Curtain. In addition, Red Power now refills the timer instead of the health, obviously, meaning you can drop Iron Curtain in a strategic spot, keep the timer going with your fists, and then when the enemies unleash fire on you, quickly cool the shield back, block the fire, fire, gain everyone a ton of overheal, then drop the Iron Curtain and do it all again. Like Bucky, this has theoretically an infinite length given enough skill and luck, but it also directly power scales to your playstyle and skill expression, and also a little bit to the intelligence of your opponents. Now, I know I've skimmed out on team-ups in a few of my videos, so today I have two of them for you. First up is Star-Crossed, a team-up with Cap, obviously playing into their shared origins. Here, Cap is the Anchor, and Red Guardian, well, he gains the Living Legend feature. That means Guardian's gift not only blocks, but also reflects incoming attacks. A fun little addition to his shield. The second team-up is more focused on A, the theme of this video being Thunderbolts, and B, the Guardian's personal history. This is Red Room, and it involves Alexei being the Anchor. When Black Widow or Winter Soldier are on his team and shoot through either Guardian's gift or Iron Curtain, their primary fire deals increased damage, making Winter Soldier effectively into a frontline juggernaut and Black Widow into an insta-kill threat, given she can find the right angle, which would be far harder than usual since Alexei also has to line up the shield and everything. Overall, as I said, I'm really happy with this kit, and I think not only does this positively represent Red Guardian, but it also applies a unique build we haven't quite gotten yet in Marvel Rivals. Now, of course, that leaves one last character from the new film to talk about. The guy I know most of you are really here for. This is Sentry and The Void. Bob Reynolds was a hero in the Golden Age, a powerful icon of hope, as strong as 1,000 suns. He could seemingly do anything, and with that power, he faced a great foe, The Void. But the issue at hand is Bob suffered from severe mental health issues, and that kind of power behind that kind of mind, well, it could only spell disaster. Sentry would soon discover that he was not fighting a physical battle with the Void, but a mental one. He was the Void. When his mind reached catastrophic lows, he transformed into this dark monstrosity and wrought destruction and chaos. Then, when his mental state was up, he returned to his heroic endeavors. Learning this led to him, Doctor Strange, and other members of the Marvel Universe removing him from everyone's memories, especially his own, so that the Void could never return. Of course, this also meant losing the Sentry. And with that, one of the greatest marketing ploys of the 21st century was born. Of course, Sentry, quote, returned in 2000, where us viewers would read his story for the actual first time. A brilliant tale about a hero learning the depths of his own mental troubles and how to maintain a battle around them. A great story that always remembers depression cannot be beat, only maintained and understood. And so, if we are to implement the hero Sentry into this game, we must therefore bring with him the Void. I know I really want the Void to feel like he targets everyone, allies included, but we also need to ensure he's still viable given it's a cooperative team game. So I don't want him to be this big downside for your own team. I then, to mirror that, almost plan to have Sentry be a powerful tool for the team as a whole. Yes, he'll be a duelist, but he'll also assist his allies where need be. Honestly, fitting these two into one role felt strange given they are so different to each other, but I think I made it work. First off, let's take a look at the hero himself, Sentry. His primary fire is symbolism of heroism, and it invokes Sentry firing a beam of bright light that damages enemies hit. This beam also applies an aura effect to enemies hit that grants any allies of yours within it a speed buff, meaning if you fire it into a team fight, your friends can hit quicker for more efficiency. Symbolism of fear emits a darkness from the Void, one that burns into foes, but then also splashes damage on impact. That splash, of course, hurts allies as well. So be careful, as targeting in a team fight could very well kill your friends. To follow that, we have Golden Age. This has Sentry raise his hand, commanding his foes to stop. All damage that would be taken during this time is instead converted into temporary overheal that immediately begins to degenerate after the ability End your foes with Dark Age. The Void summons mighty tendrils in all directions and grabs any enemies they touch, binding them to him until either he or they are vanquished. vanquished, or a period of time passes. All damage received is split evenly between the Void and his bound foes. The Void also possesses a passive ability, Eclipse. All players within a short radius of his ever-looming darkness receive a speed penalty, whether they be friend or foe. Of course, Sentry is no selfish hero, and Illuminate shows just that. This has our Golden Guardian burst with bright light and empower not only himself, but any nearby allies with a temporary damage buff. The duration of this buff increases for every allies affected, so if you're on your own, it's only gonna help you for a brief second, but in a group that multiplies to a notable lasting length. Of course, the actual buff itself remains the same, it's only the length that would increase. Now, what's a hero without a passive? And for Sentry, we have Dream's Step. This basically is just a movement type for him, letting him freely fly like Johnny, Iron Man, and Ultron, gracefully walking through a Nightmare's grip. This grants the Void a movement type much like Venom, Spidey, and Rocket, where he can effectively climb surfaces and walk along them. Now, as I said before, Bob Reynolds is a twisted man with a broken psyche. His mind is shattered, and so as the Void releases his mental tensions and deals damage, and as his friends remind him he is not alone, light builds, and if that light reaches 100%, he becomes the Sentry. Sentry is a hero, but his psyche is broken, shattered even, and so as he transforms damage and tries to fix the world, as he boosts his allies and they choose to hurt others, he can feel a darkness growing inside, and when it reaches its max, he is lost and there is only the Void. Now, I hope that really got the picture across on how this guy plays, effectively being a useful team fighter as the Sentry, but using his kit builds a meter that turns him into the monster who is even better in a fight at the cost of putting his allies in difficult situations. I can see him really proving himself on sniper or turret builds, where heroes like Namor and Hawkeye, who won't get in his way, could really prosper. But then I also see a scenario where certain tactics come into play, and survival heavy dive heroes aren't afraid to play at his side, like Captain America and Spider-Man. But as you transform back and forth, boosting allies and then unleashing hell on the battlefield, you will build ult, but it just doesn't feel right to me to give two people one ult. No. So Sentry and the Void have their own takes on spending such energy. When playing as Sentry, you gain access to Radiant Star. Using this makes him rise, much like Magneto, and shine bright above the battlefield. This glow affects a large area. Think how Adam's ult does, and all the allies within that area build ult charge at double speed. In addition, enemies within that area begin to slowly regress ult charge, unless it's already at 100%. If it is at 100%, then they simply cannot trigger it until they leave the aura or the ult ends. The general idea here is to implement an ult that plays with reality. It might not deal damage or heal allies, but it builds the rest of your team up and sets them up to do the job themselves. Of course, if you want to apply impact yourself instead of setting up 5 other fighters, then you can save this ult for the Void. The other time where I think this ult could have major impact is if you're in the middle of a team fight and you really can't risk the enemies ulting on you guys. If you're not quite needed at your full extent right then, you can hop into the air, use this ult, and guarantee you aren't going to get like a Luna or Cloak and Dagger, basically nullify any damage your team are dealing, just for the period of time that this lasts. It also might set up your Luna or Cloak to do their job. The Void can instead trigger Black Hole. This has the Void engulf himself with tendrils before unleashing a powerful dark attack that damages all players within the set range. So you really need your allies to get out of the way here. This damage is naturally high, but it then scales up based on the player's current ult percentage, playing once again into the idea of messing with reality and using the ult meter as a targeted mechanic. This effectively removes the people with the most sway from a team fight, preferably ending it before they can pull off a tactical strike. Basically doing something super similar to Sentry's prior ult, but instead of boosting your allies, it's straight up taking out enemies. I think that's a good way to define the difference between Sentry and the Void. Overall, I think this makes for a really cool take on the Sentry, and hopefully you guys agree as well. But if you don't, then let me know how you'd handle it instead. And if you're interested in our next Marvel Rivals video, then head over to the channel and vote on which X-Men you would like to see. There's 3 polls going on, 1 for each class. For Vanguard, you can choose between the iconic Juggernaut, rampaging through maps and destroying breakables, the beautiful Rogue, draining health to heal herself and stealing her opponent's powers, the mighty Armor, using her nigh unbreakable constructs to shield her team, and of course, the unkillable Darwin, adapting to every fight for the best possible chance of survival. For the Duelist poll, you guys can vote between Iceman, a hero with cold powers and possibly a slowing effect, Bishop, a mutant warrior with a man with a mean gun and a meaner superpower, Havoc, the ultimate human cannon and Cyclops' big brother, and the Black King, leader of the Hellfire Club, an all-around grade A jackass. And the Black King would be a new pseudo-tank, taking whatever your enemy throws at you. And finally, the Strategist poll. You can all vote between Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, and a great example of how to put strategy back in Strategist, Shadowcat, the fan favorite of the list, who can move through anything, and of course comes with her pet dragon, Jubilee, the bright and loud icon of the 80s herself. She'd bring a spark to the fight like no one else. And finally, Domino, using luck to her advantage, acting as Marvel Rivals' first sniper strategist. Thanks again for everyone watching, and I'll see you all soon.